On Sunday night, I was watching a movie with my wife, and we were reluctant on whether or not we were going to watch this movie because the movie was going to be 3 hours long. And yet, as you watch the movie, you hit that midway point and you get so excited because you're about to reach the climax and the movie is just escalating, and then pretty much you have all that energy you need to finish out the movie. And it doesn't matter what time it is or how tired you are. When something excites you, you get revamped. Maybe you've had a similar experience watching Netflix or something, and you suddenly realize, oh my word, I've wasted the past 4 hours and now I have to go to bed and it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Or maybe you've spent a late evening talking with a friend and you get really deep into the spiritual conversation. And it doesn't matter what time it is, you're so excited to talk about the Word of God. Certain experiences like that are exactly what Jesus is seeing here in John chapter 4. So John chapter 4 is an account that's very familiar to us. We know it as the account of Jesus with the woman at the well. But I want to point out something in verse 6. Jesus comes to Samaria. It says that he had to pass through Samaria in verse 4. But then verse 6 points out Jesus' condition, his physical condition. So Jesus, being wearied from his journey, was sitting thus by the well. So we know that Jesus has hit a point here where physically he's tired. Physically, he's exhausted from the travel, from the work, from the ministry that he's been doing. And he's also hungry at this point. So the disciples go away from Jesus and they go into the nearby city to go and purchase food. And then it's during that interaction that we see Jesus come to speak with this woman at the well, and he reveals himself to be the Messiah to her and has a wonderful conversation with her. But I want to point out what happens to the disciples in verse 31. Meanwhile, the disciples were urging him, saying, "Rabbi, eat." But he said to them, "I have food to eat that you do not know about." So the disciples are saying to one another, "No one brought him anything to eat, did he?" And Jesus said to them, "My food is to do the will of him who sent me, and to accomplish his work. Do you not say, 'There are yet 4 months, and then comes the harvest'? Behold, I say to you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields. They are white for harvest. Already he who reaps is receiving wages and is gathering fruit for life eternal, so that he who sows and he who reaps may rejoice together. For in this case the saying is true, one sows and another reaps. I have sent you to reap that for which you have not labored. Others have labored, and you have entered into their labor." So Jesus comes back together with his disciples, and they are wondering why Jesus is so excited, why he's so invigorated. Remember, they went off to buy food. Jesus was tired and he was hungry. But then he goes on to say to them, "Well, I've already eaten." "What did you eat, Jesus? Did you eat food that the Samaritan woman gave you? How is it that you're so re-energized?" And it's precisely because he says, "I was doing the will of my Father." When I do his will, when I do his work, I get excited. I get the food that I need. The disciples don't realize the food that he was talking about was this spiritual food. Much like the woman at the well didn't realize that the living water that Jesus was talking about was in fact the knowledge of him as the Christ. So let me ask you this. How many times have you found yourself praying for opportunities? Maybe you've been praying for patience. Maybe you've been praying for evangelistic opportunities. Maybe you've been praying for this certain person to come to a knowledge of Christ, or that Christ might put someone in your life who you can teach and is willing and excited to learn. Jesus says, open your eyes and see that the fields are white for harvest. But then he says something really interesting. He says, you guys say that you plant, and then in 4 months comes the harvest. Well, in the spiritual world, it doesn't work like that. You don't have to wait 4 months or any amount of time for God to answer your prayer. In fact, someone else could be praying a prayer. And in the spiritual world, God is ready for you to take advantage of that harvest. Can you open your eyes and see that there are opportunities before us? Opportunities to be patient. Opportunities to teach someone the Bible. Opportunities to find that person who is seeking the Lord. And maybe right now you're saying, well, in these circumstances, in these situations, there aren't that many opportunities. Open your eyes. Is there an opportunity right before you to study the Word of God with your spouse? To pray with your spouse? Is there an opportunity for you to teach your children the Word of God, your grandchildren? Maybe you've found some time to get to know your neighbors. Do you see them as an opportunity to show what God has been answering? Open your eyes and see that the fields are white for harvest. One sows and another reaps. I have sent you to reap for that which you have not labored. Others have labored, and you have entered into their labor. Let's open our eyes and see what opportunities are laying around us, whether it be in the form of evangelism or looking out for the ways that God answers our prayers. Let's be attentive to these things. Thank you so much for your attention today and your time with us. We hope that in hearing these messages and seeing what we're trying to do, that this will inspire you to go back to the Word of God, to see what God is trying to say to us through these, through His Word, using these various outlets. If we can be of any assistance to you, please let us know how we can help you. We thank you for your time.